Look at all the nice people.
Nice.
I recognize so many of your names. Thank you for coming. How nice.
Yay, that's awesome. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Junction Reads. This is our relaunch, and I'm so excited to have Farzana Doctor join us again for this, what is a special event. I've got all of my fingers crossed, hoping that we don't have any technical glitches, but can't do anything about that. Before we get started, I want to acknowledge the land on which we gather. Farzana and a number of us are in Tikaranto, the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, and most recently, the territory of the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation. I acknowledge my responsibility to take care of the land, and I'm grateful to have the opportunity to work in the community on this territory. Welcome, Farzana.
Thank
I'm
you
so
so
glad to
much.
have you. Thank you so much for coming. In the background, everybody, you've been talking to Kaylee, who is the event coordinator slash tech guru, who's been helping me quite a bit with the Zoom stuff. I'm going to start out with Farzana's biography. Farzana is a writer in the morning, a psychotherapist in the afternoon, and an activist in her free time. Farzana is an award-winning author of 4 novels, Stealing Nasreen, 6 Meters of Pavement, All Inclusive, and the novel we're going to be speaking about today, 7. She is also the author of a poetry collection, You Still Look the Same. Common themes that run through Farzana's work include loss, relationships, community, healing, racism, LGBTQ rights, diasporic identity, and feminism. Farzana is currently working on a YA novel and is also an amateur tarot card reader, which I'm going to be honest, when I read that, I thought, how can we work a tarot card reading into this? But no.
Yeah,
So
no.
yeah. So I'm really hoping that you'll share an excerpt from 7 with everybody who's here.
Love to. And thank you everybody for being here. And thank you, Allison and Kaylee, for organizing all of this. And I wanted to mention that poetry collection has just found a home freehand. So it should be out in 2022.
Nice.
So yeah, so that's really exciting to kind of know what my next project is. You know, so often when we're working on books, there are these major gaps of time in between books because things just take time. And it's kind of exciting that once I'm done promoting this, I'll be working on editing that. Okay, so I'm going to read in case anyone has the book in front of them and likes to read along. I know I like to. So it's page 28 that I'm going to be reading from, and I'll read just a couple of pages here. And welcome to all the new people who are joining. It's lovely to see you. Okay, so this little excerpt. So this book is about Sharifa, who goes to India on a marriage-saving trip with her academic husband and her 7-year-old daughter Z, and she thinks that she's going to be doing research on a great-great-grandfather, and she ends up exploring so much more, and we'll get into that. But this scene is just before going to India, and she's with her daughter Z and her friend Laura and Laura's daughter Elena. And it's 2015. Z and I joined Laura and Elena for a play date at the park. Laura and I found each other here 5 years ago, while our then 2-year-old daughters tentatively navigated the sandbox. We slipped into easy banter. The daughters are 7 now, just FYI. She's a mompreneur who sells custom t-shirts on Etsy and blogs about parenting. A year after we met, she shifted her writing to marital communication, later separation, and after that, divorce and shared custody arrangements. This week's column is about dating as a single mom. She's gone out with 4 men since her divorce a year back and tells me about the latest. Research, she says with mock nonchalance. Pretty good job you've got, I quip. We watch Z and Elena on the swings, pumping their legs to go higher. 6 months ago, they would have been begging us to push them, but now they boast self-reliance. I sigh with gladness and disappointment. One day, she won't need me at all, I think. This guy I'm dating is really good, Sherry. Good how? Z laughs when her swing hits its highest point. Her bottom briefly lifts an inch off the seat before the swing comes back down. Well, for one thing, he lasts a long time. She grins and waggles her eyebrows at me. Lasts? I ask, distracted by Z's high flying. She and Elena cackle, pump harder, then cackle some more. Z, not so high! Well, in bed? Laura rolls her eyes at my obtuseness. Really? Minimum 30 minutes, long enough for me to, a few times. She looks away, breaking eye contact, and focuses on the kids. As though noticing them for the first time, she shouts, Elena, take it easy. You guys are being unsafe. Z and Elena let their legs go slack, and their swings begin to slow. I ponder Laura's words, but can't think of a good follow-up question. Instead, I say, wow, that's great. What's he like otherwise? Is he relationship material? Look, they actually listen to us for once. Laura gripes about the kids, but I know she's considering my question. She lists a few common interests and the things that annoy her. While I half listen, a question bubbles up. Is my problem about lasting? If Mortaza could last even 15 minutes or half an hour, would it happen for me? I reflect on my earlier boyfriends, all of whom were energetic, youthful. They'd all tried. And just like Mortaza, there was that flicker of disappointment when they eventually gave up. Afterward, I'd have to try to be cheery and satisfied. I'd read somewhere like 15% of women don't climax, and so I'd reassure them brightly, keeping my face open, unguileful. Really, I get a contact high from you. All the feel-good chemicals you have, the endorphins, they come my way just because I'm close to you. I so badly wanted to be okay with living in a society where 100% believe in an end goal that 15% of us don't experience. Each partner grew progressively distant over time. In my head, I know they were poor matches, not meant to be, but my heart has always wondered if the sex had anything to do with their serial demises. Did it weaken their confidence in our connection? Could it happen with Mortaza? Laura is now talking about a different guy, someone new she hopes to see next week. I struggle to keep up. What's his name? Matthew. I found him on OkCupid. I'd like to see what it's like to date more than one person at a time. I've always been such a monogamist in the past. I nod, asking myself, in another life, would I want what Laura has? Multiple orgasms and the thrill of novelty. My phone beeps. Mortaza has texted me 3 pink hearts. It sounds fun. Very different from the ordinariness of marriage. Yeah, it's good for now. I'm not ready for anything too committed. To tell you the truth, I don't know if I'll ever be ready again. 1, 2, 3, go! Z and Elena scream in unison as they leap off their swings in motion. I'm on my feet in an instant, my heart pounding, but their young legs are springs, nimbly absorbing the shock of their landings. They race to the jungle gym. Hooligans. Laura pats my arm. Yeah, I sit. So you all ready for India? Haven't even started packing, but we don't leave for another 12 days. Excited? Actually, I wasn't all that excited, but now I am. I've decided to do an oral history project about my great-great-grandfather. I'm going to interview as many elders as I can. I've always wanted to do something like this. Cool. So you're writing a book? No, nothing that formal. I was thinking about a wiki or a blog or something. Maybe you can give me a tutorial when I get to that point. We both look up when Elena cries out, She must have misstepped on her way down and fallen to the sand, but her wails sound more surprised than pained. Laura rushes over, brushes the sand off Elena's shorts. In a minute, Elena sends the play structure to meet Z at its apex. The commotion passes, and I text Mortaza back 3 purple hearts. Just stop there. Thanks. Thank you, everybody.
Unmute myself. Thank you so much. I love that scene. I love the relationship between Laura and Sharifa. It's so, I mean, it's just honest and perfect in so many ways. I have some questions, of course. Anyone familiar with Junction Reads knows that I usually kick it off so that we're not putting anybody on the spot. And also because I'm selfish and I want the questions answered first. So I'm going to go into, because that scene so perfectly and honestly talks about the sex and the honest discussions about sex and the sex that comes. I'm going to kind of shoot forward into this conversation about trust. Throughout the novel, there's this underlying theme of trust with Sharifa's misstep close to the beginning of the novel and her eventual moving or becoming free, I guess, or freer with this sexual trust exercise that she and Mortaza do. I want to talk because as writers, a lot of people have a difficult time writing a good sex scene, not making it too raunchy, not making it too, hallmarky. And you, all inclusive, did it. These perfect sex scenes that really include the emotions at stake for everyone involved, but still maintain that like hotness. Like you still feel as a reader that you're like, oh, that was really good, but still quite emotional. So I just wanted you to talk about how the challenges in writing those scenes.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. So I do like writing sex because I feel like it's like one of those subjects that sometimes, people avoid. Sometimes, characters will just get to kind of this intimate moment and then the scene ends. And I think that sexuality is such an integral part of our lives, however we express it or don't express it, whatever we choose to do with it, it's kind of important. And sex is also a really great way of showing a lot. It's a form of dialogue. There's a lot of tension. There's a lot in writing sex that can take a story forward, right? All the things that we're uncomfortable with, all the things we're messy about. So I really love that. And with all of my novels, I've also tried to show some aspect of sexuality that might be marginalized or taboo to push forward conversations around sex. So like in All Inclusive, it was, the swinger community, right? And then with this, I have this, very kind of boring heterosexual couple who is, overcoming, getting past some infidelity. They're using some BDSM, so just trying to kind of push, our thinking a little bit around sexuality. And I think, the challenges in writing these kinds of scenes is editing and revising and editing, over and over again until you kind of edit out the stuff that, maybe doesn't work or might have stereotypes in it or feels gratuitous or, has my own biases blended in somehow.
Yeah, no, that was one of the things that I left with this novel with, was just that feeling of the sex scenes were perfect. Like there was at no point that I thought that I felt uncomfortable, that it felt right in so many ways. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
So sticking with the writing questions, structure was a big thing that popped out at me because Abdulali's sections are quite segregated, both in font and voice and everything. And even though, you know, we get a lot of information about Sharifa's blog and this thing that she wants to write. And at one point early on in the novel, I thought we could see Abdulali's story from her perspective, either with the blog or the final, you know, product. But this really worked. And so I'm wondering if that was something you knew. And I know that the original name for the novel, or the working title for the novel, was Four Wives. So having his voice in there was going to be important. So I wonder if you knew right off the bat, writing it, that you were going to segregate those sections. And if you wrote Abdulali's sections, you know, chronologically, or if you just wrote it all in one.
Yeah, so initially I was a little confused about how to do it. So Abdulali, for people who might not know, this is the great-great-grandfather who Sharifa is researching, and he's heavily inspired by my own great-great-grandfather. When I was doing research about my own great-great-grandfather, I didn't get very far, and I was like, you know, as a fiction writer, I wanted to know like all of the more fun details about his life, his relationships, you know, what his personality was like, all that kind of stuff. And I, you know, of course, you can't find out that information when all the people who are still alive to tell you the stories never met him, you know. So I thought, you know, this would be interesting to write about, but it'll have to be fictional. So it's for it to be interesting. And it had to be fictional as well, because I didn't want to sort of ruin my family's very, like my family really has this beloved ancestor in their minds, and it's all full of tropes. Like there's nothing imaginative about his story. It's like it is very much a rags to riches story about, you know, the good man. So I didn't, you know, I knew that I'd have to fictionalize if I wrote about him. So initially I wrote a few of the scenes, but I didn't know where to go with it. And so I just kind of popped them in there. And it was my agent, Rachel Litovsky, who said, like, amp this up, like get more of these scenes, have them come in more often. And so I went back to do some writing, and I really looked for little pieces of story that I had heard from my relatives. So for example, there's a story where he's kind of holding this impromptu protest on the steps of a private school. Apparently that was something that my great-great-grandfather did. So that was kind of fun to like, you know, imagine what would that look like. All I had was, so, you know, 2 sentences, he did this thing, and then I got to make it into a scene, right? And really, I did some research about the school and looked at old pictures so I could get all of that. What else do I want to say about that? Part of why I wanted to do that too was, you know, we see Sharifa going and like trying to research and feeling frustrated, and you know, there's all these roadblocks for her, and so she doesn't find out much. So this gives the reader what she's not learning. The reader gets to learn themselves, and then eventually it, you know, ties into things she does eventually learn about her history, which is a spoiler alert.
Right. Yeah, so keeping with the theme of family again, and I posted this on social media just in case people are like, she said that already. That line, and it's repeated in the novel, that the idea of you don't want to be left out, do you? Was so, I don't know why it hit me so hard. I don't know if it's like some kind of ghost from my past and being left out as a child, but it really did hit me. And I thought about, and of course, Kadna and I don't want to underplay the physical trauma, but I had this feeling of this psychological trauma of being lied to and manipulated and like, you know, for a lifetime, right? And especially with how close Sharifa and Tasnim Masi are, that I like it. It was so powerful to me, and I wanted to talk to you about how difficult that was. And you're talking about your real life great great grandfather and not wanting to offend people. How difficult was that to really make as powerful as it is?
Right. Yeah. I think, Kutna, we think of Kutna as a form of sexual abuse, right? And so, what a lot of survivors will talk about, is how deep those trust breaches affect people, right? So it is these emotional after effects, these sexual after effects, and for some people also physical after effects. Um, so yeah, and with a few places I wanted to have that echoing of things that are kind of said in childhood that are, kind of harmless things that then echo into the trauma, and then become meaningful. Um, so that was one of those examples of how, she's taking the threads apart to
Yeah.
understand those things.
Yeah.
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 Hmm.
Again, and I've said this to you before, but there's just so much of this novel that I know I'm going to have with me in 10 years. And that was definitely one of the,
Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
so my last thing, and everyone feel free to ask if there's a question that you want to ask Farzana, put it down in the chat and Kaylee will unmute herself and ask on your behalf. But my last thing, I wanted to talk about character. Again, completely self-serving. When I think about characters, I often think about what they would do if they weren't thrust into this story that I'm telling on their behalf. And at a number of different points in the novel, I thought about Sharifa not going to India.
Hmm.
And most especially in the end, again, which I won't spoil, and the permanent after effects of that trip to India and the life change, like Fatima's life has changed, Zainab's life has changed, and I think about the relationship with Zainab and her husband and how like so many lives have changed with this. I'm going to quit my job and go to India for, a little while. And so I'm wondering if just in speaking about Sharifa as a character and, you know, making her bigger, what do you think would have happened? And Fatima comes in strongly, but what do you think would have happened if Sharifa hadn't gone to India?
Oh, I don't know. Like, from the very beginning, I knew that she would go there and she would have to confront all of this stuff in India. But, if she didn't, so this is based on real world situations, right? So in she goes to India in 2015, 2016, when Kutna is just beginning to be talked about. It just becomes it's public discourse for the first time in India because survivors are speaking to the media about it. So all of that trickled all around the world. So, I saw a story in October 2015 on Facebook, um, that the leader, the person who founded We Speak Out posted, and I contacted her right away, and I was like, I have to join whatever you're doing here. So I would imagine that, so Sharifa is not me. She's this very avoidant person, very tightly wound. She probably would have taken years for all of this information to kind of hit her before she would have started to have conversations about it. It might have taken her, close to a decade, probably. Um, there's a scene, and I won't give away the spoilers, but there's a scene where, her cousin is trying to tell her things but backs away. And
Mm-hmm.
then there's a scene where she's trying to speak to another cousin and she starts to talk, but she thinks, should I back away? So this is the way that conversations around Kutna happen in our families these days.
Yeah.
Um, it's such a taboo subject. It's like taboo in our cells. On a cellular level, it's taboo. And so you start to talk about it and your tongue gets tied. So it takes a lot for these conversations to happen. So, in the book, when it all kind of explodes is in a moment of huge frustration and a
Mm-hmm.
fight, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So if she hadn't had that fight, I don't know what would have happened it would have exploded in the same way.
Yeah. Yeah. I love Sharifa so much. Like, just, I really and truly, I mean, I loved All Inclusive, but there's just something so emotionally powerful about the relationships. And I have three sisters, and I have close family relationships. And so I was really moved by the family dynamics in Seven.
One thing I tried to play with a bit, and I think this is an ever, and for all the, there's a lot of authors here, for all the authors here, you probably do the same thing. You wonder about like POV, point of view, like whose point of view are you going to write in, and what tense are you going to write in?
Yeah.
Like that's always like such a big question, right? And we start where we start, and then we might like change it 3 times and get very frustrated. But I was pretty clear that I wanted Sharifa to be first person because I really wanted people to get into her mind, and to know only the things she knew, to
Yeah.
probably guess at the things she didn't know too, right? Because we can do that. But I also wanted her to be in present tense, to have that immediacy.
Yeah.
So that was a real conscious choice, and I think in other books where I've written in more of an omniscient way or a third person, people have talked about feeling distant from the character a bit. So for some reason I was like, I don't want anyone to feel distant from this one. So
Yeah.
I wanted people to feel her.
Yeah. No, I mean, I can't imagine it in any other voice, because there's so much that she doesn't know that the reader knows before she knows, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and I think third person probably would have been frustrating as a reader, because we would have been wanting Sharifa to figure things out sooner,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Does anyone else have any questions? Kaylee, yeah.
Yep. I have a question from Kim. And Kim's question is, how have men in general been involved in the work related to ending Khatna? And how have men responded to your book in a way that is hopeful in relation to the social justice aspect of this work?
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Kim. Men have been coming on board. The person who is our group's webmaster is a lovely guy. And what I have seen in my own family is some of the men have been like reposting things that I post and retweeting things. There have been some activists who have taken a more pivotal role, so men are getting involved, and I think part of it is that for a long time men didn't know anything about this. Men are very much kept in the dark and about these conversations, like I mean, the women barely talk about it, and absolutely for a long time until 2015 most men would say that they didn't know about it. So I think some of the men who have been really shocked and appalled that they didn't know anything about this have been coming on board. And I think all across the world in FGM movements, there are men who are taking up space to educate other men in particular. So I think it is hopeful. What I've seen in the last 5 years is that we are having this Me Too moment for survivors. Like it used to be that what was reported was that it was happening in 30 countries across the world. And now we know it's 92 countries and counting. And that's because the survivors are saying, hey, it happens here too. Look at this, right? And that's a very strong place for us to be in, that people, that the survivors are willing to speak about it when before they couldn't. So, what we're really learning about is that this is a global issue. It's happening here until 1977. It was covered by health insurance plans in the U.S. So, there's going to be a lot of white women from the U.S. who are my age, who are going to be coming forward, because as more and more people come forward, right? So I think we're going to really be learning the truth about this issue in the coming years.
Yeah, you had mentioned in a previous interview, and I'm sorry, I can't remember what, I think it was an interview with one of your colleagues about a particular Christian religious organization in the States who practice regularly, FGM
Yeah.
regularly. And so it's not exclusively a other problem.
I'm wondering when we're going to hear about white Canadian women coming forward, because you know we're not that different from our neighbors to the south. So
Yeah.
We have a question kind of on the same train, just to kind of keep that conversation going. Tanja had a question, and she was kind of thinking about this conversation about FGM, or female genital mutilation, for those who don't know, and Kadna outside of India by Dawoodi Bohra communities. And she was wondering how prevalent it is, and what there is that non-Bohras can do to kind of join that conversation.
Thanks, Tanja. You know, it was probably in my mother's generation, it was 100% of people who went through it. And people have sort of estimated, we don't have very good stats, but people have estimated that it was around 85 or 80% of my generation. It was just so normal, you know, for this to happen. And there were 2 recent studies that came out that suggested around 75% currently it's happening too. So, you know, that's a lot of people. This is a community that is like, you know, somewhere around 1.5. We're a small community, 1.5 million diasporically across the world. It's a community that has been in the media because in Michigan and in Sydney, Australia, girls, you know, spoke to authorities, and doctors and parents were arrested and that kind of thing. I think, you know, what allies can do is to just really understand that this is a global expression of patriarchy. You know, it's not unrelated to rape culture or femicide, or, you know, today is December 6th. And, you know, we remember the Montreal massacre, but we also remember all the women who have died from femicide this year. And like, it's all part of the same continuum of controlling and harming women and non-binary people, right? So I think that's the best way to think of it, is that it really is this global thing. And then what you can do is, you know, follow and amplify the messages of survivor-led groups around the world. So I work with 2 groups. One is called the End FGMC Canada Network. New group. It's only like 1.5 years old, almost 2 years old now. And then We Speak Out is the group that I have been part of since 2015. And both are on social media, and it's great to follow. You can find like petition links in their pinned posts and stuff. So I would say that's the best thing that allies can do.
Thank you.
Right. I posted a link to that in the chat if folks want to take a look.
Oh, thanks. Thank you.
No problem. We have another question from Kim. And Kim was wondering, have you had challenging pushback from putting this work out into the world?
You know, I haven't. Any of the pushback has been my own internal inner child. You know, I had to be ready. I had to do lots of self-care, lots of therapy in order to get ready for promoting the book, to be able to talk about these issues pretty comfortably. You know, there was a time where, you know, because of the way that trauma works, you know, there's this dual message that happens for anybody who's experiencing trauma of don't talk about it, and anyway, why are you crying? Nothing's happening. You know, so you have to work through that in a huge way. But no, you know, we when We Speak Out started doing its work, and we do a lot of stuff over social media, this backlash group formed called Dawoodi Bohra Women for Religious Freedom, and the only religious freedom that they fight for is the right to cut their kids. So they're just a bogus, you know, garbage group. But we're trying to get them removed from, you know, Twitter and stuff. We haven't been successful. Anyway, they were very active for a long time in trolling us, and it was constant. And they have, for the last 6 months or so, they have disappeared. So they're still there, but they are very quiet. They no longer troll us. So I fully expected that they would come after me, but nothing has happened.
Wow, that's good. That's really
Mm-hmm.
good to hear, because
Mm-hmm.
that's concerning for any author who puts out sensitive subject matter, whether it has to do with religion or family or any,
Hmm. Hmm.
um,
And these trolls, were they're such a minority within the community. The community is generally like a very peace loving, don't rock the boat, don't talk about the hard issues. It's a very like good community of people. But then there's this like fringe
yeah,
bunch who are the bullies, right?
yeah. I
Mhm.
wonder if there's a religious leader who's quieted them, like if someone has actually come out and said, just
We wonder if that's the case because there's a case before the Supreme Court right now in India. It's been, halted because of COVID, but we wondered if because it was before the Supreme Court, they were just saying people like, just be quiet, we're dealing with this, don't cause us problems. I don't know.
yeah.
Mhm.
Any
Yeah.
other questions?
Yeah, we're kind of on this same train. Kim had another kind of follow-up question. You're talking about kind of we're moving through that trauma, but did you feel like there was sort of a weighty responsibility or an added pressure in this writing process because of the real world implications and writing about FGM? And if yes, how did you
Yeah.
manage that?
Yeah, I wanted to get things right. I mean, I think we have to get things right anyway. We have to, make sure that our descriptions sort of are, if not accurate, are something that the reader can can buy. Um, but I did really feel like because this is an issue that hasn't been discussed and probably was going to be, um, you know, coming to readers as perhaps um, a first experience of learning about Kutna, especially like maybe people have read other books by other FGM survivors from other places, but because most people have never heard about Boras and never heard about Kutna, I really wanted to do this well. I wanted to represent the community in the best way that I knew how. And there are going to be people who probably, are not going to be happy because you can't please everybody. But, I wanted to show a range of ways of remembering. So all of the people remember slightly differently. Um, there are different after effects. Everybody has very different after effects. There are different beliefs about Kutna, along the spectrum. So I wanted to have all of that. And then I wanted to write this community with love, right? Kim has recently put out an anthology that is called Inappropriate, which talks about, how do we write the other? How do we, and one of the things that comes up in that anthology, which everybody should read, is the issue that we're always writing the other in some way. If we're stepping out of our own lives and our own social location in just even one step away, like one element away, we are writing the other in some ways, right? So I was writing characters who live in India, for example, but are from my community. How was I going to write them, so that I was really showing, love and respect for these characters. And so I worked very hard on that part. I wanted there to be no villains except for, I guess there's one doctor character who might be a villain, but she's like so minor. I didn't want any of the main characters to be villains. I wanted them to be really well understood for all the things that they were in their complexity. Mhm.
Yeah, that doctor.
Mhm.
Kaylee, any other questions?
Yeah, we have a last question from Kim. And just talking about kind of the response to your book, what was the best response to your book so far? And kind of a tag along to that is was it all worth it?
Well, it's going very well in Canada. It's getting some really nice response, and this week has been the week of like the best of lists, which is always this. It's this. The fall is a very hard time for authors, right? Because you maybe don't get on a short list for, like, it didn't make any of the short lists or long lists for any of the awards, and I was like, oh my goodness, what's happening with this book? And we all kind of weather this time but it's gone very well for this book, especially in this last week. It's made it onto 3 of the, and best of year end, whatever lists. So it's getting some nice attention, and I really appreciate that. I got help from my publicist at Dundurn. Plus, I decided, this book meant, all the books mean something to me, but this book meant so much to me that I did a lot of work in pitching myself everywhere. So I'm trying really hard right now to build an audience in the US. Cross your fingers for me.
Yes.
It's not easy, right? So, I've heard some fun things. So I did this one event that was mostly Indian women academics, and like who are living in India. And there was this Bora woman who came on to ask a question, and she said, "I have to tell you, I'm so proud of you." And I was just like, my heart melted, to hear that from a Bora woman. And I've also heard from a young Bora woman that, for the first time in her family, they're having these conversations that they haven't really had before. So I feel like that's worth it. That makes it worth it. I've also, for the very first time, been reviewed by Bora women. And like, that's such a wild experience, like to have people who really understand the intricacies of a community that's not really well known, to review the book. I mean, I appreciate every single review that comes, right? Because that can be difficult to get reviewed. But there were 2. One was Manahil Bandukwala. She reviewed the book for Quill and Choir. And I'm blanking on the second name. Zara Kazema, that's her name, reviewed it for Broadview. And there were ways that they talked about it and pulled in their own personal experiences that just, I was floored when I read those reviews. So that's really new for me.
Yeah, that's great.
That was good. Yeah. Yeah.
Good. Well, thank you so much. There are no more questions unless anybody out there has another question.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. I recognize so many of your names.
We have
really
got a raffle now. So first we are going to raffle off a book pack that was generously donated to Junction Reads from More Hype Publicity. Nathaniel and I have been working together, and there's a really great interview with Farzana that Nathaniel did a few weeks ago on our website. So if you want, go and check that out. And I want to shout out, before Kaylee does the 2 final raffles, tonight at 7:30, Brent Van Staldwinen, who's here,
yeah.
it's going to be at Lit Live, and that starts at 7:30. It says 7:15 on their Eventbrite, but I think that's because they want people pouring in. So if you're going to go, try and show up before 7:30. And tonight they will host Brent, Ray Robertson, Joshua Levy, Scott Thornley, Conyer Clayton, and Mark Goldstein. So there you go. And Kaylee,
can I say, I took one of my first writing classes was with Ray Robertson. I took his writing the novel class, and it was in that class that I wrote the first chapter of Stealing Nasreen.
Oh, that's so fun. He is such a cool,
I love Ray Robertson.
Like, he's so, yeah, he's a very, we've had him, and he's one of those people that you meet, you talk to for 10 minutes and you go, I would like you to be in my clique of friends. Yeah, so anyway, but I feel that way about people. Kaylee, Farzana, before we go, do you want to shout out, we've mentioned We Speak Out, and Kaylee has shared some links in the chat, but is there anything else you want to talk about, upcoming events, or
I would say just like keep an ear out for February 6th. So February 6th is the International Day of Zero Tolerance for FGM, and because there is such a culture of silence around this issue, particularly in Canada, where the Canadian government is doing like almost nothing, one of the things that the End FGMC Canada network tries to do is just to raise awareness. So, if you work for an institution or a school or, anywhere where there are groups of people, even, collaborating online, consider signing up for one of the webinars that will be out there, or consider holding an event or a lunch and learn. I'll come. Look, just we're trying to get the awareness raising going.
Okay.
So February 6th.
February 6th, good. And I think that Kaylee has shared some stuff in the chat.
Okay.
And so feel free to screenshot if you don't have time to copy and paste. And that's it. So Kaylee, take it away. First, we're going to do the raffle for the book pack, and then we're going to do a raffle for a copy of 7. Send me an email to Junction Rights, and I will arrange with Farzana to get that book to you if you are the winner, and if you're the winner of the More Hype book pack. Take it away.
All right, so if you're here, your name has been entered in that straw, this straw, so I'm rooting around.
This is for the
more pack. All right. Our winner for that one is Mary Lou Dickinson.
Yay!
You can't see it. You can't see it, but you have to take my word for it. So congratulations to Mary Lou Dickinson. If you want to just send me.
She has a new ebook out, Mary Lou Dickinson.
Oh, really? Where? Who? What? Where? I'll find out. I'll find out, and I'll put it on Junction Read social media.
All right. So Mary Lou, we'll get your email, and we'll figure out how to get those books to you from Moorhead. And our other raffle there. Like, how long do I keep going? All right, and the second raffle, this one's for Farzana's book, is Trevor Abes. I'm so sorry, I definitely said it wrong. But that's for Trevor. So if Mary Lou and Trevor can reach out to me just in the chat, I'll get your email, and we'll make sure you can get connected. That's awesome. Thank you so much, everybody, and join us back here. If you got an invitation from me, you'll probably get another one. We've got a lot of events coming in January. We are doing these same sorts of events that are short and sweet and dedicated to one author. And on January 17th, Becky Blake will be joining us with Proof I Was Here. And we're very excited about that. Please go to eventbrite.ca and search Junction Reads, and you'll find all of our events listed there. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Kaylee. Thanks, Farzana.
My pleasure. Thank you all for being here.
Thanks. See ya. Bye.
Bye.